Ivy here. This week's podcast is part 4 of a 4-part series, so we're bringing it all together in this last episode. And the title of this particular podcast is The Cost of the Crown, the Hidden Toll, Accountability at the Top, episode 162. Introduction. This final podcast in this series will act as a mirror for the previous 3 episodes and the conclusions reached in this part 4 of the series. We will all look back together at what has come to light, or at the very least has appeared for the first time for some, and the thoughts you now have, ongoing thoughts. What has come to light or grabbed your attention? Does your list include the systems, the players, and the tactics being employed? Can you begin to see patterns emerging? Like golden threads, we have seen time and time again over the years. Now look forward. What kind of world would we want to leave behind? Who deserves our support, and who has simply inherited power without accountability? You have all seen in this series how power structures have preserved themselves by enlisting silence, complicity, media deflection, and generational gaslighting. History doesn't just repeat, it recruits. Let's think and talk about the invisible barriers, how systemic power isolates itself from accountability. I mentioned earlier in this series that the monarch is exempt from over 160 pieces of law legislation in the UK. Under the legal doctrine of sovereign immunity, King Charles is exempt from criminal and civil proceedings as the head of state. But the King's immunity extends beyond his public duties to his conduct on privately owned assets, estates and businesses. Currently, more than 30 different laws bar the police from entering private royal estates without the sovereign's permission to investigate suspected crimes. King Charles is also exempt from punishment over wildlife offences, environmental pollution, and other green crimes, a kind of legal immunity given to no other private landowner in the UK. Travelling with a passport. As the British monarch, King Charles will not require a British passport to travel internationally. Under UK law, no other British citizen can travel internationally without a passport. Every passport issued by the UK under King Charles will have a preamble that reads, His Britannic Majesty's Secretary of State requests and requires, in the name of His Majesty, all those whom it may concern, to allow the bearer to pass freely without let or hindrance, and to afford the bearer such assistance and protection as may be necessary. Under the Road Traffic Regulations Act, the King and other members of the royal family can drive as fast or as slow as they please when they are escorted by police officers on official royal business. The Prime Minister is also afforded the same right. The late Queen Elizabeth II reportedly never took an actual driving test and was able to drive without a licence plate. Since all driver's licences in the UK are issued in the monarch's name. In 2019, it was reported that the Queen had decided to no longer drive on public roads on the advice of her security team after the late Duke of Edinburgh had been involved in a car crash earlier in the year in Sandringham. King Charles is also no longer required to use a driver's licence while driving. Under the Sovereign Grant Act of 2011, the King is not legally liable to pay income tax, capital gains tax, or inheritance tax because the relevant enactments do not apply to the Crown. The same rule applies to the income from the Duchy of Cornwall, which Prince William owns. Racial, ethnic and sexual equality laws. In the 1970s, the British government introduced laws against racial and sexual discrimination in the workplace, which were later folded into the 2010 Equality Act. The monarch is exempt from these laws. This means that any individuals working for the royal family cannot file a complaint to the court if they faced any discrimination under the categories of race, sex and equal pay. A spokesperson from Buckingham Palace previously told reporters that the royal household and the sovereign complied with the provisions of the Equality Act in principle and in practice. One has to wonder then, why not just sign up to obeying the law? But, in principle, they agree with it, apparently. In 1968, the Queen's chief financial manager informed civil servants that it was not, in fact, the practice to appoint coloured immigrants or foreigners to clerical roles in the royal household. It is unknown when this practice ended, but in 1997, the palace told the Independent newspaper that it did not officially monitor staff numbers to ensure equal opportunities. In other words, they don't measure, they don't quote any statistics, and they also don't actually adhere to anything about the Equality Act. And we do know, and that has been recently as well, it's not just from in the late 1960s, they do not like to have, in particular, people of colour working in clerical roles. Basically, if they work in a servant-type position, basically below stairs, not seen very much, not very often, that appear to be where the royal family still believe that's where they are suited, and not for anything above stairs. As I said, there are over 160 laws of the UK that the monarch does not have to adhere to. And with regards to the other members of the family, the police are not allowed to question any member of the royal family if that individual is in the same room as the monarch, in this case the king. Over the years, there has been a pattern of who follows the monarch to various royal properties around the UK. One can only assume that the heat at those times was particularly hot, for whatever reason. A very apt analogy for all this effort by family members to be protected from questioning by the police, and I doubt the police were too concerned about not being able to gain access, but there would be a metaphor such as the soundproof room, where cries of injustice are muffled by tradition and ceremony. When those in power are immune from consequence, they are not leaders. They are occupants of impunity. Leverage lost and loyalty bought. It has been obvious for most non-royalists that for centuries now, and certainly in my lifetime, it is crystal clear that the UK media has been bought. The silent contract is no longer silent, and the evidence grows each day to continuously strengthen the days when action will eventually be taken. We, the people of the UK, have seen so many things with our own eyes. No amount of gaslighting is going to change the evidence. The media is there to promote the UK royal family and the village that surrounds them, to ensure that the quid pro quo is still running and everyone who is in the fold continues to be taken care of, as long as they each do their part. The media is no different. They wish to have access to the royals, and for that they are able to keep their jobs, whilst all other practicing journalists are losing theirs on a regular basis because the news industry, printed and online, is no match for the skilled news media worldwide who operate online. That being said, both printed and online tabloid-style news reporting is so far from reality, none of them should call themselves journalists. They left that name tag behind a long time ago. If they were ever inclined to operate in any way that was of useful impact to the population as a whole. The gaslighting is off the scale, but thankfully more and more people recognise the game now and are prepared to question and voice their opinions based on facts out loud for all to hear. The protection of certain people is evident. No matter the photos of holdalls and shopping bags carrying anything but the weekly shopping haul, and despite names once printed of those involved in that particular chain of activity, soon is removed from views and various forms of fiction appear in its place, masquerading as breaking news to create distraction and deflection from the truth. When one looks at the range of organisations and professional bodies that come within the remit of the monarch, the whole environment is worse than a bad joke. None of those organisations or public bodies or enforcement agencies are ever genuinely going to question or interrogate anyone in that group of people and organisations. The rest of us minions can be questioned, and far worse, merely for expressing an opinion on some topics. Never mind really concerning actions taken towards another person or people who live on another continent. Accountability for those responsible will also catch up with them one day. Loyalty is not owed to power. It is earned by truth. The Reckoning. And these are a few direct quotes from an edition of the New Statesman. The full article is actually in the article as a whole for this podcast, so it's all there. But there are spin-off articles from it which are contained in the reference sources if you wish to pursue further information that emanates from this particular discussion. It was an event, a Cambridge Literary Festival event in 2024, and the person that does most of the speaking the public speaking, but also as part of this article, put it together with a number of colleagues, and her name is Anna Whitelock. As I said, I'm not going to read through all of it here. I have put the whole of the article there, but I am going to read some extracts from it, because in itself, it is a very good, interesting article. But as I said, I'll leave you to look at that yourself, and I'll just do a few extracts from it. 2 weeks before the coronation of King Charles, Anna and some of her fellow colleagues were taking part in a debate, and the motion was, "This House believes it is time for Britain to abolish its monarchy." End of quote. Drawing on arguments about class, accountability, soft power, and stability. Their opening remarks throw light on an issue that goes to the heart of what it means to be British. A direct quote from Anna in this debate, and it was, "We can't be the nation we want to be while ruled by an unaccountable relic." End of quote. Tradition, splendour, pomp, pageantry, national unity, soft diplomacy, tourism, even professors of the history of modern monarchy, these are all oft-cited reasons, perhaps not the latter, for the merits, indeed necessity, of retaining and celebrating the British monarchy. They are all reasons that, to some extent, I do or did have some sympathy with. This is still Anna, by the way. She says her research of more than 20 years has focused on the monarchy, its rituals, rights and roles, its kings, and in particular its queens. It is, as some would have it, a golden thread through British history. But all of that is in the past. The question here is about the future. Another quote from Anna. "Once perhaps it might have been said that the monarchy represented the best of Britain. I think that's debatable, but now surely that is no longer true. It doesn't, indeed it can't, represent modern Britain, modern British values and beliefs, not least in equality, diversity and inclusivity." The Guardian newspaper has asked questions about how much is paid for working royals. For royal engagement, how much is the king worth? The cost of the coronation to the British public, and so on. And they've done previous work and inquiries into the legal position and constitutional influence of the monarchy as well. Now, to all of those questions, and I've spoken to the reporters involved, Buckingham Palace responds, "Ask someone else. Work it out yourself, or you have no right to know." If you go to the National Archives and call up documents there, seemingly innocuous ones, many return a computer message that says simply, "The file is closed," and invites you to make a Freedom of Information request. The royal family is exempt from that. So when you put a request in, the responses come back, no. And I've put in some very recent Freedom of Information requests, and that has been the response. So we have entrenched secrecy. We are kept in the dark. Yes, we citizens in a celebrated democracy are unable to give our informed consent because we don't know. Criticism or debate of the royal family is prohibited in Parliament. The royal archives are effectively closed. There is no financial disclosure, and when there has been investigation, the findings are pretty disturbing. We know about crown consent, sovereign immunity, so scratch the surface, and it is just the surface, and it doesn't look good. The last one, or maybe the last but one. In 2006, the Queen was given an exemption for an act which prevented mistreatment of animals. The exemption meant that inspectors couldn't enter her private estates. Perhaps most concerning and surprising, the royal household is exempt from the Equality Act of 2010, which we've already covered, which protects people in the workplace from discrimination. Buckingham Palace, when asked about that, didn't deny the exemption. They just said they have their own process. And then there's sovereign immunity. This holds that the monarch can't be prosecuted or subject to civil legal action under the law. Effectively, we have a monarch unable to be tried for criminal behaviour. On a number of cases, the Crown is being granted legal immunity in respect of its private estates, such as Sandringham and Balmoral. Are we all okay with that? As I said, there's much more in that particular report from the New Statesman, but I think I've just given you a flavour of the kind of things that it covered. Very, very interesting. Another teaser headline, which all of these that I read out, these one-liners, are on slides on the video podcast. This one, legacy will not protect you from the truth. It only delays its arrival. What does justice look like in real terms? Accountability needs a coordinated, stepped approach in order to change the current system where a monarchy family is answerable to no one. This is not the time to stay quiet. It is time to begin a recognisable process. If some people are considered above the law, then there is no such thing as equality under the law. No one is covered by the law in entirety when there is one group of people who are above the law, and they decide on which new pieces of legislation will interfere with the way they do things, and they are allowed to opt out. Time is well overdue for a change in that arrangement. A way forward to achieve accountability in due course. Addressing the accountability of the British royal family and ensuring they adhere to the same legal and ethical standards as other citizens involves several complex aspects, as they enjoy certain legal immunities and historical privileges. Here are some general suggestions and considerations for promoting accountability. 1. Legislative change. Advocacy for legal reforms to remove or limit the exemptions and privileges afforded to the monarchy could be pursued. This requires significant political will and public support to influence Parliament. 2. Public pressure and advocacy. Public opinion plays a crucial role in holding any institution accountable. Campaigns, public debates, and media discussions can increase awareness and put pressure on the monarchy to adhere to modern standards of accountability and transparency. 3. Judicial interpretation. Encouraging courts to interpret existing laws in ways that balance the privileges of the monarchy with the rights and protections afforded by modern democratic principles could also help. However, this is complex due to the robust legal immunities currently in place. 4. Use of international standards encouraging compliance with international human rights norms and standards by leveraging bodies such as the United Nations or the European Union, where relevant, could provide a framework for accountability. 5. Supporting whistleblowers. Creating strong protections for whistleblowers from within the royal household could encourage transparency and accountability by allowing insiders to report unethical or illegal activities without fear of reprisal. When I read this, it brought to mind a recent, in the last 12-18 months, an incident that came to light in some quarters, although if you start looking at newspapers now online, you won't come across it easily because that has been removed or well hidden. But this incident, it's a case that we the public know of and involves the children of the heir to the throne and the nanny who had been looking after the children since Prince George was born. That's the firstborn, the oldest child. To give you some idea of how long this nanny was around them. It has been alleged that the nanny was supplying information to a Spanish newspaper, and she was dismissed on the spot and made to leave that day. The Spanish newspaper, which was reporting for months on a particular issue, and the palace concerned continuously denied such information was accurate. It ultimately posted an article in UK media that they would take legal action if the allegation was not withdrawn, and at the time they were going to try and take action against the particular journalist and the newspaper that the person worked for. To this day, the Spanish newspaper and the reporter stand by their story, and no court case has taken place as far as I am aware. The nanny has been spotted a few times back in Spain. It is assumed that is where she now lives. A change in whistleblower status would have made a big difference for that particular nanny. 6. Public engagement. Active public engagement in civic processes and discussions about the role of the monarchy in modern society might influence change. Encouraging debates about the constitutional role of the monarchy may stimulate significant legislative or societal changes. 7. Dialogue and collaboration. Engaging with members of the royal family who are open to reform and modernisation can help build internal support for change. Some members may be advocates for transparency and modernisation. It is important to recognise that achieving accountability for the royal family involves long-term efforts and multifaceted strategies, combining legal, political, and public engagement initiatives. In the article, there's quite a lot. It's not a long article, but the majority of it refers to the relationship between the royal family and royal correspondence. And neither of the two sides are, from this report, neither of the two sides are happy with how things are, but neither of them can afford to walk away because they mutually benefit one another as well. So you'll come across that in the article. Interesting reading and more detail about that, because that article was fairly short, but there's more detail about that and the research behind it in the reference sources. And before I move on to the conclusion, I'll just read 3 lines from that particular section about royal correspondence and the royal family. And the extract is this: the data illustrates the various frustrations of royal correspondence in terms of access, getting responses from the monarchy's communication teams, and the potential professional risk of getting it wrong. This has significant implications for questions of media, culture, and ideology in the UK media, and the power afforded to the British monarchy in regulating its own media coverage. We will now bring together the 4 episodes in this series, and our conclusion covers all 4. There is a toll to every injustice ignored. Some pay with time, others pay with their health. Some lose their voice, others lose their life. The highest price is often paid by those without protection, without connections, and without the means to fight back. In this final episode of the series, we look not only at the institution that wears the crown, but at the wider web of silence, complicity, and exemption that surrounds it. We explore how tradition, prestige, and propaganda shield the guilty and silence the suffering. A silent contract, royals, and the right-wing press. The unspoken agreement between the British royal family and certain media factions has bred a culture of myth-making and erasure. Behind the gilded walls, a performance of service plays out, with just enough pomp to keep the public distracted. But behind closed doors, privilege is protected and justice is perverted. Another one-liner that represents all of that. Together, the royals and the right-wing press created a monster, polished it with tradition, and dressed it in silk. Exemption from 160 plus laws. The hidden shield. It is no accident that the monarchy remains immune from accountability. With exemptions from over 160 laws, including those relating to race, health and safety, and workers' rights, the Crown is protected not just by history, but by carefully crafted legislative blind spots. Justice deferred, accountability denied. When certain individuals ensure they are in the same room as the monarch, they enjoy immunity from legal questioning on royal grounds. Private jets, taxpayer-funded vehicles, and royal residences serve more than just comfort. They become shields from consequences. Karma has a clock. They never planned for Harry to leave. Never imagined he would take his capable wife and children and walk away from it all. They thought they could run the show with a ghostwriter in the background and a golden heir up front. but the lights are brighter now, and the shadows harder to ignore. Every moment of silence from those who knew and did nothing, that is complicity. Every exemption that shields wrongdoing, that is corruption. This isn't just monarchy. It's monarchy unmasked. And history is watching. That is the end of episode 4. It is the end of the 4-part series. And I really hope that you have found at least a few things, but hopefully more, things of interest, things that you can put a pin in, because there is no doubt many of these issues are going to crop up in the future, and it will be handy to have things to hand that you can refer to get accuracy and truth. So thank you for all your support, and there have been some wonderful, wonderful comments over these last 4 episodes. And as I stated in my notes, to tell you all on YouTube about the articles were now up for both last week and for the week before on the website. And then underneath I mentioned about sort of comments and publicising some of those comments, not with your names, just the actual comment that was made. So there was going to be, there's 2 parts to it. The first part is I will be doing something most weeks where I will just sort of send out like a flyer, and it will be on a post page, and it will just have some of these comments that stood out. So you'll recognise if you see yours in one of those. We've got the design for it already, so it's going to go out looking, you'll know it's from that initiative. And on the same token, this enormous project that I've been working on for 8 years, it is coming, well, it is complete. We're doing the extra things now around images and graphics, infographics, all of that. But as part of that, because we were talking about, and I say we, my editor that I'm working with at the moment, there's going to be a similar process, and it will be comments over the last 8 years, and certainly in terms of the lifetime of this podcast channel. So if you have made any comments over the last 4 or 5 years to do with the podcasts, it is highly likely that I will be extracting from each of the years of the SG UK podcast channel going forward, and they will be quoted in the book. When I say quoted, again, not names, unless you want your name there, and if you're happy to have your name there, then let me know. If you see a quote, or you know that there's something that you'd like to sort of comment on, and you think that it might be worth submitting to be in the book, let me know. If you sort of say, is it possible to be considered? And if I am successful, I would like my name put there, if that's all right. But if you don't, you don't want your name there, that's fine, because that's the actual way I'm going about it. I'm not putting people's name there unless they want their name there. But I hope that you will, I don't know about enjoy, but feel okay about having a quote or more, because well be more than one that comes from some of you over the years. But the quotes are all related to the themes of a particular podcast, or one of the 5 main themes that you've seen me put on all of the slides for this podcast channel, including value for money, history, mental health, targeted online, hate for hire, and legal. I think that's the 5. I'm just remembering if I've got them all, but either way, but that's where they'll be clustered. So in the book, all of those 5 sections will have comments that have come in from subscribers and people who view the channel, but subscribers and members who have submitted comments. I am trying to pull together with the editor it's going to be a high number because it's a huge book. Really, it's over 2,000 pages. It's huge. But it contains very important information around human rights, and hopefully when that comes on sale, that you will want to look at it and explore. Not for your comments, because you'll know what your comments are, but I'm just saying that that's part of an initiative that we will be sending out. I will be just posting in the community, on the community page, about quotes that have come in, and just publicise them because they stand out. And beyond that, just to let you know, there's going to be a similar process, but those quotes will be in the book. When I know when those sort of dates and publication dates and all of that are finalised, obviously I will let you all know. So that's it really for this week's and for this particular series. And just so you know, a 5-part series starts from the following week, because I've quite enjoyed doing a series. It allows me to research deeply and to put them into categories and do a particular theme for each one. So the next one that's coming up, again involving royalty and other shenanigans that they've been involved in, there will be 5 episodes in that. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for any comments that you're going to make Sunday night onwards. And just bear in mind, if you wish to take part in having comments published in a book, and you would like to put your name, then let me know via a message of some kind. But if you just hope that you'll be one of those picked and you won't mind because it's anonymous anyway, then there's nothing for you to say. Other than, if you don't want a comment to appear, whether it's with a name or not, definitely let me know about that, because that's important. If I know that someone doesn't want to be, even if it's anonymous, they don't want any of their quotes in that publication, please let me know. If I've got that name up front, then I know when I'm going through them, if I see, not if the name will be there when I'm going through them, because I'll be looking through the comments pages, but I will know that that person has said they don't want to take part in it, full stop. So if you're happy to take part, and if you're chosen, you won't have a problem with it, you don't really need to say anything. If you want to add your name to it, let me know, so I will keep that name with a comment should I pick one. And that's it really. It all will get very, very busy, very hectic. Not for you, but you will hear lots of things that are going on over the next few months, and it's all to do with that. It's all to do with marketing and publishing and all that goes. I'm learning by the day of all what's entailed with that. So thank you very much for your support. It hasn't gone to waste. Just know that over 130 plus podcasts are included in the book in some way. And I'm very proud of that, because it just shows that the topics that we are discussing every week, most days in some shape or form, but certainly every week, they were done with a purpose in mind. They were matching the themes, the 5 themes that have been displayed on all of the slides over that time since 2021. And now they're about to go into the public realm. Not now, over the next few months. So thank you very much for that, because we've done it together. It's not been done in isolation, and it feels like a small but growing, very, very close SG UK community. So thank you for that. So I hope you enjoy episode 4, and I certainly hope you enjoy the next series coming up of 5 episodes. So it's goodbye from me, and goodbye from Ivy. Bye.